interesting is in the Indiana Jones movie, 2 of the 4 movies, the artifact that he is after is of a biblical nature. And by far and away, the best of the Indiana Jones movies was the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And of course, the Ark being the Ark of the Covenant. And it's kind of fascinating that they would choose a biblical artifact for him to be searching after. And it's like, why is that? Well, it's because there's nothing greater than God himself. There's nothing more mysterious than to seek after God. And what's cool about this is you could actually go in the Bible and you could read about the thing that he was going after. And so just for just a couple of minutes, I just want to read to you a little bit about what was known as the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was a sacred box. It was about 4 1/4 feet wide, 2.5 feet tall by 2.5 feet wide, covered with acacia wood, and then overlaid with gold. Gold rings at each end, and there were 2 poles, wooden poles that went through covered in gold so that they could carry it. And on the lid there were 2 cherubs facing each other with their wings spread over the top of the ark. And on the inside of that box was some fascinating things. It was the testimony of evidence of God's covenant with his people, i.e. the 10 Commandments. There was also a golden jar with some of the manna that the Israelites were fed out in the wilderness. And then there was the rod of Aaron that budded. The ark was a sign of advance for the army of Israel. In fact, in Numbers it says, they set out from the mountain of the Lord and traveled for 3 days. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them during those days to find a place to rest. The ark was also the seat of theophanistic power for the people of Israel. There was that episode of whenever the priests carried the ark down into the river, that the water actually parted out of the way of the ark and went to each side. And then you remember whenever the walls of Jericho fell down, the ark was carried around 7 days before the armies of Israel. And then on the 7th day they blew the trumpet and the walls completely fell down. And you can imagine the enemies of Israel were terrified of that little 4-foot box, for sure, because of the power that was there. The ark was actually captured twice. And the second time that it was captured, Eli, the old priest, actually declared, he said, Ichabod, which means the glory has departed. So that little box, the glory of God has gone away. It was a sad, sad day. Also, the Philistines took the ark and they put it in a room when it was captured before a stone god called Dagon. And in the morning when they came in there, Dagon had actually fallen down and was broken and crumbled in pieces before the ark. Obviously, they didn't want that thing around. And so they sent it back, and the Israelites brought the ark back to them. And one of the things that happened that was just really, really wild with this box is while they were bringing it back, it says here in 2 Samuel 6:6, when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down and he died there beside the ark. Can you imagine a guy, one of the good guys, accidentally touching the ark to try to steady it, and he's killed right there in front of everybody. As you can imagine, that made everybody scared. So David was like, man, I don't know if I even want this thing near us. So he sent it to another guy's house to say, hey, let it stay over there. Let it just hang out over there with you because this thing is way too powerful. And while it was there, not only was it a great terror in some ways, but it was also a great blessing. And this guy that had it in his house, he was absolutely blessed with everything just by the presence of that box being right there. Whenever the ark was in the place of the temple, the priest would emerge, and only the priest could go in there. It was hidden and shrouded by different covers. And the priest would go in there, and whenever they would come out, it says that one moment the temple was filled with smoke, and everyone sensed that the presence of God was there. Even Aaron, who was one of the high priests, he could only go in and see this box one time a year on what was called the Day of Atonement. And one of the things that's fascinating about this, why is it that this box was so amazing and so powerful? And you can imagine at the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, whenever the Nazis are about to open up the Ark, and Marion and Indy are there, and he says, look away, and they don't look. And when the bad guys open up the box, all this scary stuff starts happening, and ghosts start flying around, and their eyeballs fly out and they melt, and it's horrible and it's terrifying and it's scary. But believe it or not, it actually kind of is similar to the way that this thing was described. Why is that? Why is it like that? Well, what's fascinating is this, is those two angels that were on top of the ark with their wings spread out, that was actually considered the throne of God. And the place where God himself would sit, with the box being where he would put his feet. It was his throne and his footstool, and it represented the very presence of God himself on earth. And that was the place where Moses would go and talk to God and receive the commands from the Almighty. So that's scary and it's terrifying. But I got to thinking about this. That makes for a great movie. But here's the thing that's fascinating, is that was actually true. That stuff that I just read to you is from the Bible. And what's weird about that is I thought, just like Indiana Jones and all the people were on this quest to find this ark, and why was it so powerful, the presence of God, that is the same quest that you and I are on. And that is the quest for God's presence, for himself, his very nature of who he is. That is what we're after. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you some clues for the treasure hunt. I'm going to give you some clues for the quest. And really it should be our goal with all of our desire to seek out God and to be in his very presence. Psalm 27:4 says this, "One thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever, all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and seek him in his temple." I mean, that is our quest. But you say, man, he's so terrifying, he's awful. How do we do that? Well, I'm going to give you some clues as to how it happens. If you can look at your bulletin there, and the first clue is this. We first must understand, I must understand, to get in God's presence, I must understand who he is, and I must understand who I am. Well, first, who is God? I'm going to read you some scriptures that describe the way that he is. You have a mighty arm, strong is your hand, and high is your right hand. Righteousness and justice are the foundations of your throne. Mercy and truth go before your face. Big words in that scripture. Righteousness, justice, mercy, truth. That is who God is. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of his trumpet, and the mighty smoke. When the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. That scripture is speaking of the presence of God. When they saw the might of it, they were actually afraid. And they went away from it, and they stood at a distance. Sounds a little bit different than kind of what we typically talk about in church. Who is he? There is no one holy like the Lord. Indeed, there is no one beside you, nor is there any rock like our God. So you get the picture? He's big. He's mighty. He's truthful. He's just. And he's to be feared. That is a picture of God. Imagine what it would be like to be standing in the presence of someone like that. Well, these people were terrified of it. They were afraid. So that's God. Now what about us? Understand who I am. Who am I? Well, Scripture talks about us too. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. God, we're short of it, of him. As is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. And surely I was sinful at birth, Psalm 51:5 says, sinful from the very time my mother conceived me. And so here's this picture of God, big, mighty, powerful, boom. And here's this picture of me, lowly, small, not worthy, not even close. And I just told you a while ago, our quest is to seek him. As you can see, that seems like an impossible task.